Dr. Sue Jackson, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Sonia. It's great to join you.
You know, it's funny. I came across your work. I was doing the Master of Applied Positive Psychology at Penn a couple years ago, and we had a unit on music in James Powalski's Humanities and Human Flourishing course. And I had this experience where when I'm riding my indoor bike on the trainer, it seemed that I was having these self-transcendent experiences of like this feeling of oneness, of this brightness in my chest, and everything melted away. And that music was sort of certain types of music and intensity were prompting that. So I did kind of a deep dive and kind of looked at how do you differentiate a self-transcendent experience versus flow versus peak experiences, and how do you measure all those things? So I came across your work in flow, and then I was at the IPA World Congress in Brisbane recently, and then you were a speaker. So I thought, this is awesome. Like, what a great opportunity to get to chat with you.
Yeah, and thanks for coming down after the presentation. That's for me the most enjoyable part is actually the conversations afterwards. Yeah.
I mean, there's so many interesting places that we could go with today's conversation. And I want to think about the listeners, but I'm also, I have my own personal selfish questions that I want to ask. But I guess, let's start with a kind of a broad strokes perspective here. Like, can you define what flow is? I know there's many different conditions that can allow flow to arise and how common it actually is.
So defining flow, it's a very interesting question. Like at a very simple level, it's when you're totally absorbed in what you're doing in the present moment, in a challenging activity, and it brings you great enjoyment. And that's because of the different type of psychological state that you find yourself in flow, which has several dimensions, as you're aware. And so, yeah, we could go into those, but like just holistically, totally absorbed in what you're doing something challenging and meaningful, and it's enjoyable.
I do want to go into some of the details, the different things that allow for flow to arise. But you said enjoyable and meaningful, and this is actually one of my questions: is what's enjoyable is sort of subjective, and there are meaningful things that are not really enjoyable, or there's meaningful things that are after the fact you realize they were enjoyable. So, like, how does this perception of enjoyment impact your sort of like how enjoyment can contradict meaning in some cases? Like, how does that lead to flow, or how does that not lead to flow?
Enjoyment?
Having this kind of different subjective definition of what enjoyment is. So, for example, I'll make it more concrete. Like, if I'm in a bike race, I might be enjoying myself and it might be meaningful, but it also might be painful at the same time. So how do you define enjoyment whenever we're talking about flow?
Well, it's not so much how I define it, but how Csikszentmihalyi defined it. It's a really important question. But it tends to be the result of experiencing flow. Like, it's enjoyable during it due to the coming together of the characteristics of flow. But because we're so focused on what we're doing during the performance or the task, it's more afterwards we're reflecting on the enjoyment. But Csikszentmihalyi did distinguish between, as you would be familiar with, eudaimonic and what's the other one?
Hedonic.
Hedonic, sorry, just like it's morning here, so you have to forgive me. And so definitely it's more in the eudaimonic vein. It's he distinguishes enjoyment from pleasure, for example. So enjoyment is being engaged in something meaningful, creating something, developing something, expanding yourself, challenging yourself, separated from pleasure. And so, yeah, and that comes because of in flow, it's a challenging, effortful activity, even though one of the characteristics is it seems more effortless. It's actually, you're putting in quite a bit of effort because you're raising the challenge of what you would normally be confronting yourself with in whatever performance arena we're talking about. We could get specific or just keep it general.
Do you mind going into the different dimensions that can allow flow to arise, just for the listeners? And then I want to start kind of going into that a bit.
Yeah, so like the conditions, as they're called now, like yes, they are the dimensions of flow, but they're also like seen as occurring to help flow happen. And so there's three of them, and I've already alluded to one. That's the challenge skill balance. So that's when, and I think visually it helps, but if like you imagine like just two intersecting lines of the challenge on the vertical axis and skills on the horizontal axis, it's where you are raising both challenge and skill beyond your usual level. So you put yourself in a challenging situation, but you don't do that without having the skill set to meet the challenge. So there's this nice balance there. And different people have talked about, well, what exactly is that balance? But yeah, it's a balance of some sort. And then so that's one. And then clear goals is really important. So that's knowing clearly what it is that you're wanting to do in the situation that you've put yourself in. And it's not like outcome goals, which that might have taken you to be in the situation in the particular activity, but it's more the process goals of while you're doing the activity, knowing what it is you want to achieve. And then paired with that one is the unambiguous feedback. So that's when you're getting clear and immediate feedback about how you're doing. And that helps keep you on task. So how you're doing in relation to the goals that you have.
I'm going to go backwards. So, the
Hmm.
feedback piece, I've been thinking about this. So, there's a
Okay.
couple different things. Like, number one, doing physical activities or, playing a game or something, like there's really obvious external feedback that you're receiving. But what about when you're doing things when the feedback is more intrinsic? And like I'm thinking about this in terms of say like for me it's like I'm reading all this research, I'm doing integration. The feedback is not external, it's internal. Does that
Mm.
still count as feedback?
Probably more so, particularly like we come from a sporting background. You're more of an elite one than myself. But for anyone that's actually doing something involving the body, and that could be a musician or a performing artist of some sort or an athlete, it's that feedback that you're getting from the body that matters more than what any external feedback, particularly as you challenge yourself and you get to a more elite level. And I'm sure that you can relate to that. It's like being so in tune with what you're doing that you can make those very small adjustments that keep you moving towards the goal or the goals that are unfolding as you continue the performance. So the internal feedback, I think, is most critical.
So being more in tune with what your body is telling you, whether you're doing a sport or whether you're recording a
Yeah,
podcast.
yeah, yeah. True, true, true. And did you find that in your mountain biking?
It depends, like my sport is I do like ultra endurance. So,
Mm,
the where I was world champion was in 24-hour mountain bike racing, so you literally are racing for 24 hours straight. I don't
okay.
The weird thing is people ask me about it, I don't really remember the race. I know I wasn't in flow for 24 hours, definitely not, and maybe it's some of that's, you forget you forget things that are really hard. I would say more generally though, like if I've had flow experiences in mountain biking, it would be, riding technical terrain downhill
That's what I was thinking.
because you
Yeah,
can't be there's no
yeah,
thinking involved. You're in a
yeah,
moment where like you're just doing it. But I have
yeah.
found this is an additional question I have about this is that when you're in these high challenge environments, like there's mental fatigue that happens even when you're having, or for me, even when I was having flow experiences. Over time, my brain just gets tired, and then it's like I just can't do it anymore, and my brain needs to actually recover.
Mm,
Have you seen that in your work?
mm. Uh, yeah, more so. It's not something that I researched directly, although it did come out in interviews a little bit. So when I was first researching flow, I did that via in-depth interviews with elite athletes. Really took that into some fine detail there. But in my work now as a performance psychologist, and I'm talking to people about flow, the question often comes up about, can you be in flow all the time? And the recognition that it is taking a lot of effort, which alludes back to what I was mentioning before, because you're so fully engaged. Like if you think about, if you decide to fully engage yourself in whatever that task or performance is, particularly if it goes for a period of time, afterwards you do feel a sense of, whoa, that that was big. I need a bit of a recovery period here, and I think it signifies just how intense that experience can be. And the more intense the flow experience is, the more recovery that you need. I've actually had a couple of performers from different domains recently share with me that they always take a nap after, like, they're morning people, and that they're doing their good work in the morning, and then they're then taking a nap because of the need to then be present for the rest of the day for whatever those demands are. And also, like, one of these is an athlete, and they're doing their sport in the morning, and they find what the sport that they do is very flow facilitative, and they've really noticed that need to have some downtime afterwards.
I was thinking also about just like discomfort. Um, can being uncomfortable actually
Mm.
help you have more feedback, and help you
Oh,
have
yeah.
more
Well,
flow? Like I think about like
mhm.
riding up a hill or doing intervals, like it hurts, but it keeps
Yeah.
you very focused at the task at hand because there's a lot of sensations happening.
Yeah, and that comes into that mindfulness space, right? And also acceptance is what I'm hearing as you're talking there, like being comfortable with being the uncomfortable. And as an elite athlete, you get used to that, right? It's just part of it. As you say, there's parts that are really, really strenuous, and then, like, in other situations, it might be something that you find very difficult, a social interaction of some sort, or a presentation, and so on. And and so being able to get to the point of noticing the sensations that come up, say before the presentation, before you walk on the stage, and what you're experiencing, and learning to be okay with that, knowing that that's like part of your body and mind preparing you for the challenge. So yeah, I think discomfort and learning to be present with it, it's a difficult one. Um, but I think it's something that's very critically important.
Yeah, so it sounds like your perception is of this is really important. Like you were just alluding to, like how you perceive stress, or how you perceive the intensity before doing something hard. So yeah, like the perception of whether you're prepared maybe is an important one.
Mm. Oh yeah, definitely. And that goes back to my early research with athletes. Was I was looking at the factors that they perceived influenced flow, and over a broad set of athletes, feeling prepared for what you were going to do. And they were athletes, so there was that physical, knowing that you were physically prepared. And then there was also the physical readiness closer to the time of the performance. So doing whatever was part of that pre-performance routine so that you felt very ready for what you were doing.
So I think about this too because there's lots of times where like your self-efficacy, your previous experiences can lead to how you perceive how ready you are. I'll give an
Yes.
example. Like, there's lots of events that I've been prepared for where I've done everything right and the event didn't go well. And
Yeah.
there's lots of events that I've done. It's like I barely trained, I was sick, and then I show up and I win the race.
Wow.
So having, a bunch of different experiences under my belt, basically it just tells me that I'm just gonna show up and I know that good things are possible and I don't need things to be a certain way, and that perception, helps me, like, not think that things need to go a certain way so that I
Mm.
can be more calm whenever I enter the arena, so to speak. Have you seen that in your work where, like,
Mm.
there's different, conditions whenever people are preparing, but their perception of past experiences lead to them feeling
Yeah.
more
Yeah,
confident?
so the self-efficacy is very important. And on that skills, I mentioned, like, there's this model where there's the intersection of challenges and skills. And what
Mhm.
becomes more important as one moves up the skill ladder is your perception of your skills and your trust in your skills. So, like, you gave the example of sometimes you went into a race and you weren't all that prepared, but you still had sufficient self-efficacy or trust in those skills based on previous performance and the other factors that influence self-efficacy to be able to trust in your skills and not be focused on the things that weren't so optimal leading into the event.
Yeah, something that I also wanted to ask you about was self-consciousness, because you can't have flow experiences if there's a bunch of self-conscious evaluations happening. And it seems like so many people are thinking about, how they're doing instead of what they're doing. You
Very
know,
much.
how do you help? And because you're a performance psychologist, I'm a mental performance coach, but I'm not a performance psychologist. How do you help people um, not be so focused on the self evaluation loop while they're doing something, so that they can have more of these, either focused or flow
Mm.
experiences emerge?
Yeah, it's a really critical one, isn't it? And the world that we live in really heightens self-consciousness. It is a lot about how you're presenting and how you perceive others are perceiving you, and that that at different stages of our lives also becomes a prominent thing. So young people often experience self-consciousness to a high level, but some people are more prone to it than others. But I'm sure you're familiar that loss of self-consciousness is one of the dimensions of flow. That is, when you're in flow, you're not self-conscious. And actually, in my research, I found that it's one of the indicators of being in a deeper level of flow, but also one of the reasons that it becomes so enjoyable is that freedom for a period of time from this thing that kind of plagues us to an extent. This, you know, how am I doing? Like, what does she think of me? Where's this going? I don't know, like, blah, 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 all this stuff going inside your head that you can just let go of that and just keep coming back to the present moment.
Yeah, so having like that mindful practice of coming back to the present moment. So, are you saying that people who are more mindful tend to experience
Mm.
flow more?
Yeah, that's something that I came to subsequent to my most of my research in flow. Actually, I came to mindfulness after working in the area of flow. And I actually came to it through yoga practice, and that's where a lot of mindfulness is grounded in those Eastern traditions. And so I found that in that practice of yoga, it was for me a time where it was it had some characteristics of flow, and I also just liked the sense of being present and how it cultivated that. And so that led me into a journey of being very interested in mindfulness and doing a lot of reading in that area. And I definitely see strong parallels between mindfulness and flow, and actually have written about how it's, for me, an excellent pathway to flow.
Yeah, it kind of almost seems like if you're doing something hard that meet the dimensions of flow and you're mindful while you're doing that, then it's going to be a lot easier for you to experience
Mm,
flow.
mm. But as you know, mindfulness is a discipline, and it's something that you need to develop and work on. Some people are
Mhm.
naturally more attuned to being in the present moment, but most of us have to work on it because we haven't sort of learned that, and what everything around us, especially technology, has encouraged us to be flicking our attention between one thing or another, just like a remote. Our attention. It's like someone's got this remote inside our head, and they're constantly switching channels, and that isn't going to be conducive to flow. And so it's that ability to sustain attention on the task. And that's what mindfulness helps us to be able to do through this process of noticing where your awareness is at any time. And then if it's not in the present moment, being able to bring it back to the present moment.
Yeah, I was just thinking about just experiences, and for this podcast, in part to
Mm.
reduce some of my work, I do this thing called mindfulness in action, where I'm out on my bike or I'm out for a run, and I just turn on my headphones, and then I just start talking, and then I try and lead a mindfulness practice, of what I do whenever I'm out on the trail. So, like, coming back over and over to the sound of your tires or the air on your skin, or just whatever happens, and then eventually when you do that, like, I think about this sometimes because people ask me, like, "What are you thinking about whenever you're racing?" And a lot of times I'm not thinking about anything, but I think it's because of the practice of, like, when something comes up, you just notice, but then the thoughts, there's just less of them. It's like less of the clouds coming into your sky. I don't know. What do you have you heard anybody talk about that in your because you've done so many qualitative, studies.
Yeah, so your experience was when you're on the bike in preparation, you would talk out loud? Is that what you're saying?
Well, I just lead these, mindfulness in action, like, podcasts while I'm actually
Oh,
exercising,
you
while
would
I'm out
listen
yeah,
to
like
them?
no,
Or
I'll
you
create them. Like, I'll just
you'll
turn on my
create
headphones,
them?
like, on my bike
Oh.
while I'm riding along, and I'll just tell like, describe what's happening in my mind.
Oh,
I'll
cool.
describe, like, what
That's
do I
great.
do? What do I do to become more mindful? And then when I practice those things, it just makes it so that my mind's not as busy whenever I'm out doing something whenever the challenge rises, my mind is not as active thinking about things because I've practiced so many times out on the trail, trying to just be
Uh-huh.
mindful of some type of sensation,
Nice. That's a
not
great way to
necessarily
train.
breath. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's an excellent way to train. It's kind of simulating what you want your mind to be doing, right? So you're
Mhm.
doing the same thing physically as you might do in a race in the training, but you're also trying to get the mind onto the sensory world that you're experiencing, which helps us to be in the present moment. So yeah,
Yeah.
that's great mental prep. And yes, the mental prep, I've heard athletes talk about how important that is, and I'm aware of it coming from sports psychology. The it's not just the physical preparation. You've got to have that mental training, the mental skills training, and one of those really critical skills is the focus of attention and the ability to refocus attention. And how do we develop that? One excellent way is through that mindful practice that we've been talking about.
Yeah, and I also wanted to go a layer deeper when it comes to flow
Hmm.
experiences and mindfulness and sports psychology. Like when athletes are out there, I've read that like elite athletes do a much better job with tuning in, like association, tuning into all the things happening
Hmm.
inside, and then being able to switch to the outside world and going back and forth. And that in and of itself is that a mindfulness practice in and of itself?
Yeah. I mean, I think that's kind of critical to mindfulness. I mean,
Uh-huh.
there probably are, definitely some mindfulness practices that are about noticing what's going on. So, like if you did a mindfulness of sounds practice, that's kind of more tuning you into what's going on in your environment without sort of having a critical response to it. But um, yeah, like that most mindfulness practices, as you know, are grounded in the breath in some way, and that's totally an internal experience. So it is bringing you into the body. It's an excellent way to help you get internal, and then from there, like keep developing that either through different breathing practices or body awareness, body scan practices, and so on, and then yeah, noticing what's happening in the external world and then being able to let it go and come back to what's happening in the internal world. Because I mean, ultimately flow is an internal world experience. It's not happening outside of ourselves. Therefore, we've got to be attuned to our internal world.
I also wanted to ask you about the skills challenge balance because what happens whenever you have really high skill um, and then you need to like how do you keep pushing the envelope to raise the challenge so that it could be you can be more challenging than your skill level? How do you keep
Mm.
pushing that without it becoming dangerous or without just
Yeah.
doing something dumb?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I think there's wisdom involved in that, and maybe having a good coach or coaches as well. Um, where that's possible, or teachers. But it is important. I think in the realm of sport, there's very little ceiling, right? We're always seeing people pushing the boundaries, creating a new record, doing something that hasn't been done before, and it's quite incredible to watch, really, or to take part in if you're at that level. There's also you mentioned the word risk. I mean, if there's risk involved in the activity that you're doing, it becomes super critical that you have a good awareness of where you're at with that challenge skill balance. And yes, you want to be pushing yourself a little bit out of your comfort zone, but not too far, not when there's consequences.
Yeah.
that
I'm thinking
could
about,
be
like,
quite.
Alex Honnold, for
Yeah,
example.
I was too. Did you watch, did you watch Taipei 101?
No, I did not. I can't watch that stuff. It's too stressful for me to watch.
It's funny because I watched it and, I also watched Free Solo, and you know what really struck me, anyone else that watched Taipei 101, where Honnold climbed one of the tallest buildings in the world without any protection, was the smile on his face the whole way. He was
Uh-huh.
totally enjoying what he was doing.
And also the subjective evaluation of risk. Um,
Exactly.
this is like a sore spot for me because I continue to mountain bike through both of my pregnancies. I have 2 kids, like, all the way up until basically the day before they were born, and people
Oh.
would kinda criticize me like, "Oh, this you're
Mm,
taking too much of a risk here, like, these
mm.
trails are too hard," and for me, it wasn't a risk, like, once every, like, several years, I might crash, and it's usually because 'cause I'm doing something stupid, like, it's not I wasn't taking a risk, so it just depends on what the person thinks.
It does. And for you, why wasn't it a risk? Can you just go into that a little bit more?
Well, it's probably the skill challenge thing is like my skill set is so high that I'm not feeling very challenged, and also if there's any type of doubt in the back of my mind, if the consequence is high, like I'm pregnant or whatever, then I just won't do that. I just will get off my bike and walk it or just not do certain trails.
Yeah.
There's just a level of comfort there that you just sort of know. It's like intuitive.
Yeah. Very similar when I've heard Alex Honnold interview, just as, an example of somebody who was really pushing the boundaries from most mortals' perspectives anyway. He Because people are always asking him, how do you manage the pressure of that, and the risk that, you're climbing this and there's no ropes. And his response is that he separates risk from consequence.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, yeah. And that's what I was hearing a little bit in yours. Like, for you, like the consequence of you falling off your bike when you're 30 weeks pregnant, that's not a good consequence. The consequence of Honnold falling off El Capitan with no ropes, we don't need to go there. And he knows that. But for him, while the consequences are big, the risk of that consequence happening is extremely low in his mind. Why? Because of the preparation to get there. It's not that somebody else should go and emulate what he's done without also having the skill set that he has and doing the work that he's done. You know, so many times he would do the route on El Capitan with ropes. So many times he would go through it in his mind, hold by hold by hold. He was totally prepared when he came to do it. And the time before he did it, we actually successfully executed partway up. He made that decision. I'm not, I'm not going any further today. This is not today. This isn't
Mhm,
happening.
mhm,
So you got to be able to do that too. Kind of like back to you. No, it's time for me to get off my bike,
mhm.
you know? So there really is some wisdom involved there.
Yeah, and I think that kinda comes back to what you were talking about with self-trust earlier as well.
Mm, definitely. It is trust, but it's not trust it's grounded in the preparation.
Mhm.
I think that's really important when whatever you're doing involves risk or when the performance consequences matter. Maybe it's not your life at risk, but maybe there's some important consequence of your performance, some outcome that really matters. Like being prepared is important,
I also
more
wanted to
critical.
ask you about sort of the like, self-trust and competence are 2 different things. Like, you might have all the skills to be able to
Mm,
do something, but to be able to
mm,
trust yourself to execute on those skills or that you'll be able to when the pressure is high is another thing
mm.
altogether. Like, in your work, have you kinda wrestled with those 2 things?
Oh yeah, yeah. They're very distinct, aren't they? And I find that a lot of the work I do with high level performers is who have the skills. Otherwise, when they're coming to me and they're well established in whatever domain they are operating in, you know, by virtue of the fact that they're operating in that domain, they have the skills because luck can only get you so far. Like if you are operating at a high level, you've got the skills, but that doesn't translate to trusting that you have the skills. And so it's about working with the trust aspect and helping the performer or the individual to recognize the reasons why they can trust themselves, and maybe exploring the reasons that they're not trusting themselves too, and working through those.
Yeah, it seems like, to have conditions for flow experiences, there needs to be some sort of surrender, or
Mm.
like away from, the death grip. Because I'm thinking about literally like mountain biking, like when you're riding, like the things when I don't ride something, like if I'm trying to increase my skill set, I know that I can do it. Like I know that I have the skills to do it, but I'm too afraid to let go because ultimately it's a battle of self trust. It's like you have to trust that you are able to do this.
And it's a bit of a battle is what you're describing
Yeah.
sometimes.
Yeah.
Yeah, and but other times it's not.
Hmm.
So what makes that difference, do you think?
I actually think it's, having people as vicarious experience. It's having people around you that are a similar skill level, and you see them do it, and then it helps you believe that you can do it too, and then you go for it,
Okay.
and you're like, "Oh, that
Okay.
was way easier than I was making." Like, in
Okay.
my head, this was gonna be crazy, and this was so easy, and then you laugh about it.
So you're bringing in self-efficacy yet again,
Yeah.
that's the self-efficacy of the vicarious experience, yeah.
Mhm,
Yeah, it's
mhm.
very interesting.
I wanna ask because it seems like people abuse the word flow all the time, like Steven Kotler. I feel bad, like, naming names, but it just seems like all these people are saying, "Oh, you can make flow happen, and it happens all the time." And in my experience, it's not something that's happening all the time, it's not something that you can force to happen, and I really wanted to talk about how that word is just sort of overused, in place of other things that might be happening.
Yeah, it's a great, topic for discussion, sensitive too, no doubt. I was just curious, that last bit that you said about other things might be happening, like, what would those things be
Maybe
if
you're
it's
just like
low?
maybe you're just like focused, like you're just being really mindful, you're in the moment,
Mhm. Mm.
you're enjoying yourself, but it's not all the conditions of flow. Or maybe, this is
Yeah.
another question I have. Maybe you're neurodivergent and you are in a moment, you're in a hyper focused state, which kind of could
Mm.
feel
Yeah.
like flow. Or you're
Yeah.
autistic
Yeah.
and you're like in a special interests, mode.
Mm.
Like,
Yeah.
is flow happening in those, or is it something else? Or, like, when you're having a great conversation with somebody and you're not thinking about other things, like, right now, I'm not thinking about other things, but I
Yeah.
know I'm not having a flow experience.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, interesting. We could explore that too. But I think that flow is being, we're hearing the term more, and for me, that's a great thing, because my passion is has always been, since I first picked up Csikszentmihalyi's first book, on flow. That was for me in the 80s. I was like, wow, this matters, flow matters. And so to get a greater awareness of flow is really important to me. And when I hear it, like the recent Winter Olympics, some sports there very conducive to flow, and I would hear it, if I hear it from the athlete, like it to me, that's more authentic. As an experience, versus somebody commentating on it. Well, what are they actually meaning? Do they know what they're talking about? So we're hearing it more, and that's great. And at the same time, people can have different understandings of what flow is. And I think Stephen Kotler, he's an amazing author. And when I think about the first book I think was his first book on flow, The Rise of Superman. I mean, who were his subjects? The population that he was interviewing there were extreme sport athletes. And I remember in the book, uh, it's kind of this idea of flow or die. And so, like, for that cohort, perhaps flow does happen when they are doing these extreme performances, on a regular basis. But does that mean the rest of us who are not, like, putting ourselves, right at the very boundary of our challenge skill balance, like, for people that aren't doing that all the time, or that's not their job. Like, no, I don't think that getting into flow happens as easily as what it might be thought. I think that's a misperception that you can just like make flow happen. You can't manufacture flow. I don't think. I think there are probably a few individuals in the world, and they've got like an extremely high skill set, and they have that opportunity to challenge themselves to an extremely high level, like Alex Honnold, for example, probably can get into flow a lot of the time. But, not at the same time, like if Honnold's taking his young kids out on a climb, well, probably that's not going to be a flow experience because he's going to be working to the challenge skill balance level of his kids, which is not going to be his challenge skill balance level. So, yeah, I think that it's important to recognize that flow can happen, but that it's not an easy state to achieve.
So how does somebody know, if it was flow or if it was just like a heightened state of engagement?
Yeah. Well, I think that it's a difficult one, and I think that, well, for me, like if it's possible to assess, did the 9 dimensions of flow that Csikszentmihalyi has identified, did they occur, or did most of them occur in that situation? Then does it meet the criteria,
Mhm.
or not? Because yes, there is a state of deep focus and also hyper focus, which you've referred to, and very similar to flow in this focus aspect, but also different in other ways. Yeah. So recognizing that just because you're totally focused on what you're doing doesn't necessarily mean that you're in flow.
And being totally focused is still good for you. It's still good for,
Oh,
for
totally.
well-being and yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. That's exactly right. And we need to develop that ability to be more in focus, and to be able to tune into something that matters to us.
Another sort of idea I had was like when people are tired, like the challenge rises. Like if you're
Yeah.
tired, you're not able to deal with things as much. Or like
Yeah.
another kind of side note was like hormonal fluctuation because your
Hmm.
hormones impact your perception. Like how does that impact flow? Can it increase your chances of having flow if you're more tired because it reduces well it increases the challenge but reduces like the stakes, I guess.
That's interesting. I think maybe there's a level of tiredness, but then I don't think that's been looked at in a research way. But like if I just think about myself, I find having a good sleep matters a lot. Like in terms of how I perceive my energy and my ability to focus and so on the next day, and um, that's something I'm probably like hyper aware of.
Mhm.
Um, and I think that there's probably a balance there. I think it's a factor that would influence the experience that we have. But I don't think we know enough about like whether it, what level of tiredness might be optimal, or
Mhm.
suboptimal. But just from
Mhm.
a subjective point of view, most people can relate to if they wake up and they've had a great sleep. And I'm just not talking just about the amount of sleep, but that quality sleep, deep sleep, and so on, then they're firing on more cylinders than if they haven't.
Mhm.
But what's your experience with that?
I mean, for sure, like, when I sleep better, everything is better, but I was just thinking more in terms of parenting actually,
Oh,
because
parenting. Yeah, I was wondering if you're going there.
yeah, like, because for example, like, last night, I didn't sleep very well because people are coming in my room and whatnot, so now I'm tired, and
Uh-huh.
now I know I'll pick my kids up from school, and there's gonna be lots of emotional challenges, and regulation challenges, but then I also go back to, okay, like, what are the skills that I have in order to manage
I
myself?
see. Right.
Um, and it creates more opportunity for me to use those. The threshold is lower, but it doesn't mean that I want that. I mean, it might make it even harder for me to be more
Yeah.
regulated because I'm tired.
Yeah, yeah, like we don't want to have the interrupted sleep, but also, as you're saying there, well, maybe it means that you're more aware that you need to draw on certain strengths that you have to
Mhm,
operate in the way that you want to in the day. Because, yeah, and it's like, I was thinking back to the interview research, things I asked athletes what would prevent flow or disrupt flow, and often they were the things that weren't so much within their control, like if they'd done the work and done the prep and so on, but they woke up and the weather in whatever way negatively impacted their performance or their teammates or something their coach said or didn't said. These sort of factors can get in the way, interrupt or prevent you getting there. Um, and so, like having an awareness of the sort of things. So, like getting a poor sleep, you don't have total control over the quality of sleep that you get. You've got some control. You can set it up well and so on, but some nights will be great and some nights won't. And and your kids don't really care if you got a podcast the next day, right? It's just like if they need you, then that's just so yeah. So it's kind of like, well, okay, so this has happened. This is suboptimal. What am I going to do about it? If I want X, Y, Z to happen in the way I want it today.
But I think that comes back to the perception piece, like what you talked about with the weather. Like, I love this example in my talks because so many people just melt down whenever it's bad weather if they're like at a mountain bike race. But
Uh-huh.
your perception of what that weather means could actually allow you to be even better if you choose to do that. Like if
Right.
you make all these judgments of how it's going to actually be when it's really like in your head. Like rain is just
Okay.
water. Um like how will you perceive it? So and
Okay.
same with
So
like parenting, I think too. Like if you wake up, you're like, I slept poorly, it's gonna be a bad day. And then you look for all the
exactly.
ways it's
Yeah.
gonna be bad.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like why throw away the whole day, based on
Uh-huh.
one factor that's
Uh-huh.
suboptimal.
Uh-huh.
That's where you got to draw in other things. So for you, like the weather in a mountain bike race, it sounds like you trained enough in suboptimal weather or pretty bad weather maybe, so that like it wasn't going to be a detractor for you. Is that right?
Yeah, and just deciding that it's not gonna be that big of a deal. Like,
Okay.
I'm
Yeah.
gonna be
Which we
uncomfortable.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah. Yeah, yeah. Kind of like with the sleep thing. Yeah, well,
Uh-huh.
wasn't great. We should have been better, but here I
It's like
am showing up anyway.
the acceptance thing that you talked about, like, at the
The
very beginning.
acceptance. Yeah.
Mhm,
Yeah.
mhm. I'm gonna change gears for the last couple of minutes here.
Sure.
Coming back to the neurodivergence, and have you
Mm.
seen any studies on neurodivergence and flow?
I haven't. Have you?
No, I haven't, but I've been wondering about this because I have many friends and even maybe my own tendencies towards hyperfocus, and I've been
Mm.
asking like, is this like a I don't think this counts as flow because it's very hard to stop, and it's like you don't want to get out of your chair or you don't want to go home. You can't make yourself stop. So like that would mean it's not flow if you can't make yourself stop, right?
I don't know. Why would that be?
Because there's no choice in the matter. It takes away the choice.
Ah, okay, right. Okay. Interesting. I was just thinking like when someone's in flow, they don't want that flow experience to stop either.
Yeah. Like I don't know
But
if they're different.
but yeah, it's interesting. There could be a subtle difference there. Whereas like you're suggesting that that hyper focus, there's this kind of like this force acting on you that won't let you stop. Yeah?
Kind of. Yeah, like, you're
Yeah.
doing it, but everything like, it feels intrinsically rewarding, like, you're really enjoying it, you're taking on a challenge, like, you're
Hmm.
completely in the zone when you're doing it, but then you look at the clock and you're like, "Oh, I gotta go," and it's like, I don't wanna stop, and I'm just gonna keep going," and then you look at the clock
Okay.
again. Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah. And there's probably quite a bit of similarity, and it'd be a great area for research if there's any budding researchers out there that wanted to look at similarities and differences between flow and hyperfocus. I think we can speculate about some of them, and I remember back at in the time when we met, there was a question raised about hyperfocus and flow.
Mm.
So they're not the same, but they do share some characteristics.
Mhm. Another kind of thought is around curiosity, so going back
Mm,
to the self-consciousness that people experience, when you can be more curious about your experience, more open, then
mm,
maybe you're less likely to be, as judgmental of yourself. So, like, is
yeah.
curiosity or could curiosity be kind of like a mechanism?
Mm,
Yeah.
yeah, definitely. I think so. And if I'm thinking back to Csikszentmihalyi's work, I think he would definitely endorse that idea of curiosity. And he's done some work in areas with people that have attained a lot. So he wrote a book called Creativity that's involving the data was based on interviews with people who have really achieved a lot in their fields. You know, I'm talking about Nobel Prize winners included in that sample, and if you read that book, you'll see curiosity is a big part
Mm.
of those individuals' explorations. You know,
Mhm.
which then leads to the flow experience.
Hmm. Yeah, and also, like, curiosity, like, Shigi Oishi's work on psychological richness, he's been on this podcast, like, A Life of Complexity and Novelty, and that ultimately shifts your perspective. That also makes me think a little bit about flow because, like, you emerge with your a different sense of self, and there is, like, challenges and things like that, so I'm wondering if there's a relationship there between flow experiences and psychological richness.
Yeah, well, again, High definitely put a lot of emphasis on one of the important outcomes of flow experiences for him was growth in psychological complexity.
Mhm.
That was a downstream effect of flow experiences, and he wrote quite extensively about that. You know, he wrote about so many things at quite a, a very deep level, and I think that it'd be great if people had a greater awareness of just the richness of what the flow concept is. And I think that, you know, reading High's work gives you a glimpse into that.
Yeah, it seems like there needs to be just if I zoom out way big picture, just more integration. Because it kind of feels like flow is kind of over here, and then there's all these amazing things over here, and there's so much integration that could be done across all of these different models of
True.
well-being and ways of living. There just needs to be more
Mm.
integration of that because there's so much overlap.
Yeah. Yeah. But, you know, we live in a world of specialization, right? So, yeah, somebody might pick up on that integration. I think that it would be a good thing for to put the pieces together, weave the puzzle together.
So for my last kind of point that I wanted to bring up is, I was working on getting ready for this podcast and I went into the podcast player and I just typed in your name and I saw all the amazing podcasts you've been on, like how much like energy and time you've spent into helping educate people on flow aside from all of the other work that you do, which is amazing. But something in these titles bothered me. The
Okay.
titles would say like achieving flow. And it kept
Right.
making flow being this thing that you achieve, and I did not like the way that that was framed because it just made it seem like this, like, outcome thing that you're just trying to grasp, and I don't know, I don't like the word achievement altogether, so whenever I saw achieving
Okay.
flow, it just, like, really bothered me, and I wanted to know what your thoughts are about that.
I think the word is used quite a bit, and obviously you found that. Um, I prefer words like facilitate, you know, flow to achieving flow.
Mhm.
However, I can understand why the achieving flow phrase is there because flow offers so much. Like it's a special experience, and definitely that's what I hear, what I heard in my research. I hear in today's world where I'm operating more at the practitioner level. And uh, so, because it's such a valued experience, I guess that might account for why the word achieving flow is there. But I totally take your point about it's not about the outcome; it's about the process, and that it's, as I said earlier, it's not something that we can totally, control whether or not it happens. It's something we can facilitate, not have, a light switch that, "Yeah, okay, now it's flow." For most of us, I'm not saying there's probably some individuals that can light switch it, but I think they're the exception. And I think that, you know, they're not the ones for us to emulate. Like we need to emulate what's more likely is that we got to put in the preparation. We've got to understand the conditions that foster flow and then set the stage for it, but not like demand it either.
I love that the conditions is like a way of being, a way of moving towards something.
Mm, yeah.
Well, thanks so much for coming on the podcast. I mean, there's just so many things that we could talk about. We did talk about flow, but we talked about some other things as well, which I actually thought added some richness to the discussion.
Yeah, yeah,
Um,
great question, Sonia. Like,
and
obviously, you've integrated a number of different areas because you brought in quite a few in the questions that you asked. And I always like it if somebody asks me questions that maybe I don't quite know the answer to, but it's an interesting one, and that's you asking the questions that we'll get to know where to direct attention, whether that's research attention or like more communication amongst people working in different areas and so on. So it's kind of like really important to embrace that. And so thank you for that opportunity.
Great. And where's the best place for people to get in touch with you?
Um, Website drsuejackson.com is probably the easiest way to find me, and resources there like what I've written and so on, and like the work that I do. So I live in Australia. A lot of the work I do is online now, and so yeah, welcome any communications from people that might want to follow it up further.
Great. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you, Sonia.